Thank you, Ebony, and welcome everyone to this month's Connect with Remedy monthly webinar series. Today we have a SmartIT Social Event Manager webinar will be the topic. During the presentation, if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A pod to ask them of our panelists and they will be answered. If a question is deferred to the end to our presenter, then it will be asked live to the presenter. Today we have Dinesh. Elaprolu is our presenter. He's a principal product developer, and I will turn it over to him to take us through this month's webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Hello, folks. This is Dinesh Elaprolu. I'm principal product developer for the SmartIT product in BMC. I've been in this company for almost 16 years now. Worked in every stage of the Remedy platform, from all the lines, from Windows Admin Tool to mid-tier and server. And now I'm in the SmartIT team working on the backend infrastructure. So what do we mean by Social Event Manager? So in order to explain what the module Social Event Manager does, we want to understand how social as an aspect in IT and how it works in the new products called SmartIT and MyIT. Then we'll go through the components that we have in the current applications, how useful it is for us, and then we are going to see how do we do it. Like, we're going to go with the architecture, and in our architecture, how the entire flow of events do happen. Then we'll be introducing where the social event module comes in, and what are the data flows, what are the important objects in it, how are the operational sides of the social event manager are going to work. We'll be discussing some troubleshooting steps, some issues where we have faced in the past, and we're going to go through it and tell what are the remediation steps for that. In the end, we have some time. I'll be answering the questions. In the meanwhile, my panelists will be taking care of the Q&A session too. So let's get started. Social in IT. What is it? Well, social apps have been intertwined in our daily life now. From a consumer side of things, you have Facebook, Twitter. From IT standpoint, Chatter comes into mind. Similarly, there are more social aspects coming into the IT life that makes the job of the IT personnel very easy, and it's easy to collaborate when you have these kind of aspects. Now, what do we call social aspects? Well, the idea is, what are my capabilities to connect to my daily events, to me? What are they? How quickly I can access them? Okay, and how do I see them? Like the wall concept. When you go to Facebook, you see a wall, you know what's happening there, who have posted lately. So the same concept can be built in, but here you are more connected to the entities that you're working with or the people you're working with. Then the other way is, once you are there, you also would like to know that you are interested in other entities. How do I follow them? So that's another concept that's out there. And the notifications. Notifications play an important role because you would like to know what happened on a specific event, on a specific entity, when it happens. So broadcasts and outages are the typical notification in ITSM system where you would like to know quickly about whether something has happened or not. Then you can target posts, like you are an agent and you want to talk to people, you want to address a note to some other agent. This makes easier where a Twitter kind of ad mention happens where you can post it and the person who is on the other side, if his name is there, then he's going to receive it. Similarly with Twitter, we have in MyIT a capability of tagging and searching posts. We have a group concepts where group of people can collaborate on a work. They can publish microblogs, collaborate other things, and it keeps going. So these are the typical social aspects that we would also love to see in IT. So social in SmartIT and MyIT. What is it? So we have moved away from do-it-all apps where you would have to go through individual screens, figure out what the entities have happened, like if you are interested to know what's happening in an incident. The idea is in ITSM today through mid-tier, you have to go and get through the ITSM, the incident console screen, go to the incident, check the work logs. That's the only way today that you can get some of the information about it. With the next generation of apps, they are more persona-driven. So you have a specific person, what his responsibilities are, the applications are written to drive that. So BMC, it's been some time now, BMC has introduced a persona-driven application concepts. There are two applications, MyIT and SmartIT. MyIT takes care of all consumer-driven, from the consumer side, service requests, all of those things, appointments, those are the things that the MyIT takes care of. From a SmartIT side, it's highly package and support driven, and the social aspects greatly benefit us. So what do we provide in this? One is what we call user feed or activity timeline. Now this, when I log in, I get a quick view of my events that I'm responsible for, that I can address it and make it easier. And it's pretty simple for me to go and address the ones that I know that have a problem right now. Instead of going through a list of things and navigating to multiple screens, I get all my information in one screen. What it can do. So we have an ability to follow. We have a concept of at mention, so you can target, as I said, you can target to other agent. I'll show you in the next screen how each component provides all these things. We have groups and tagging, and at the same time, you can comment on the post. We have threaded comments in MyIT where it pretty much works like a Facebook wall where you can add comments to posts, and you can add comments to comments too. So that's the way it works today. So in the list of our social components, here is the first example, which is the SmartIT user feed. Now, as I said, the great benefit that these aspects give us is you are connected to the information that you are responsible for. So as you log in, this is what you get on the SmartIT screen. So you get a user feed. Now, if you can look at this, all you see is a list of events, the incidents. You can get all the broadcasts and the notifications, what are all the current following. These are all the latest information that you can get. These are all clickable links. You can have attachments that you can quickly open it. If they have attachments, you can click on the link and it will go to the incident and you can address it right away. Any of the SLA violations that you have, you can quickly see it here, okay, and you can go into that entity and resolve it. The next example, what we have is what we call activities or something called an entity timeline. Now what this does is give a social aspect to an entity itself. Now in a consumer-driven social, it's primarily people. Now in IT, you want individual objects of IT or domain of IT to be social-driven too. So we have all the tickets are all social-driven. That means all the tickets can post their information on what happened to them, what are the event changes, like any status changes that happen, or any SLA alerts that we got, or anything that's even posted on it. Okay, but how do you be part of this? So you see that star out there, that's the follow button. Right now that color says that this user who's logged in is following these posts, okay, this entity. If it's white, the star comes up in background white, then all it says is you have not yet followed. You can see the entity if you have the permission to do it. You can see the post, but you cannot really contribute to it. You can follow it. You can click on the follow button, and if you have the access, you have the right permissions, what you will see is any updates that happen in this entity, you will see it in your user feed. That's a very good way of connecting your objects together and seeing it in one place. So then there comes the MyIT also. It's not just SmartIT that is greatly benefiting from social. MyIT has its own components where it takes all this information and shows it to the consumer and makes them collaborate more into it. So the difference between SmartIT and MyIT is it has also got a concept of user feed or a wall. The difference is here, because it's consumer driven, you can comment on it. So there's a post that comes in, you can add comments to it. These are threaded comments, you can add comments to comments. That's how the feed works in MyIT. You can create microblogs in the social aspect for MyIT. So you can create your microblog and people can comment on it and post on it, and it will show up on your feed. There is also a concept of groups. It's just like any other social groups, but here it makes, think about it like, you're working as an IT support service, you have a support group. You have a list of few people who are targeted to address a particular area of problems. Now you can form a group yourself and you can collaborate the information, share information across to see if somebody has faced this, and you can quickly find if you get some knowledge articles from another person, and you can quickly share it out and close the defect. As you can see here, there's an administrator for the group, and here are the members for that group. And the good thing here is you know exactly which member posted what here. So we have thumbnail concepts. So all the profiles that we have are now actually established in the social layer, where we get all the information of the users and we give their profiles and everything about that. So how does it all work? It's all good. These are all the components. Now how does it all work? To explain that, I have to take you to how the current system architecture works. Okay. So this is a general SmartIT MyIT architecture. We support 3 different types of clients. We support Android clients, we support iOS clients, we also support something called a universal client, which is a browser client. Okay? They all connect via firewall or a load balancer to the SmartIT MyIT server, which is a web application installed in Tomcat. Okay? Now what are the important modules of the SmartIT MyIT server? We have the RDBMS data store. Now this is normally an Oracle or SQL server, and this contains all the information about tenant configurations, system configurations. It also has information on tenant data, some of the data that doesn't go into external systems. We have our own storage, which is fully multi-tenant. Okay? We have SSO provider, a single sign-on providers. You can use Atrium SSO or the new one, Remedy SSO, where you talk to an IDP, an identity provider, and you can integrate multiple apps through the single sign-on process. SmartIT also has the concept of chatting, so where agents can chat with each other. We are open Firebase chat engine, so there's an integration with that. Now the important part of it is the social engine. Okay, this social engine is written in Node.js for us, so this is responsible for all the activity, CRUD operations, all the social activities, and also searching, which is the important part of it. And where do we store it? We store it in a social data store, which is on MongoDB. Now, why did we use MongoDB? MongoDB is an unstructured database. It gives us a lot more benefits when we are talking about data where we have to scale a lot. It provides good sharding, and it has got a good master-slave technique where you can connect read servers to write servers and leave them separate so the writes don't, kind of conflict with the reads. That's a good way of, making sure that the search does not get hindered. That's one of the reasons. Another part of the way MyIT server communicates is through a provider framework. Think about this as any other plugin framework. We have a concept called providers where people write individual plugins. People, as in our developers, write individual plugins. And SmartIT has some plugins called ITSM, knowledge management, asset. MyIT has enterprise app store, room scheduling. Now these plugins or these providers are a means to connect to either internal data stores or external data sources. Now, if you think about Enterprise App Store, it's supposed to connect to an app zone. It's a REST-based client. It's going to connect to an external app zone system that's out there. Whereas ITSM, knowledge, and asset talk to AR server. So these providers primarily call the AR server to the standard AR Java API interfaces. Okay? We have room scheduling that MyIT uses, where it's going to go talk to the RDBMS data store because most of the data of the room scheduling is stored there. We also have a push model for our mobile phones. We use APNS and GCM as our push technologies, where any information that comes in can be pushed onto the mobile clients and they can immediately see. And I'll explain you in the next few slides in why this helps us in the social layer also. So, enter Social Event Manager. So one of the things the Social Event Manager does, it's a module. It's an important module in it. It's located in the AR server as a plugin. It's an AR server ARDBC plugin. Now what this does is any events that are fired in the ITSM server, I mean from SmartIT, even part of most of the MyIT, we're primarily sitting on top of an AR server. Okay, that is going to be our main engine where all our business logic does reside, and that is going to be churning all the time. So it generates very important events. So as part of these events, how do we connect them back? Okay, these events are there in AR server, but how do we take it into an unstructured database and make sure it's faster searchable and it's available across the board? So for that, use a Social Event Manager. It's a plugin. It takes all the events that are generated on the AR server side, ITSM AR server side, and it sends it back to the SmartIT, MyIT server through REST calls. Okay, and then it finally reaches the social engine and the social data store, and the SmartIT, MyIT apps can now go and connect to the social engine and get their data. Okay, let me explain in deep about what Social Event Manager will do. Now, in the rest of the presentation, what you will be seeing is the Social Event Manager will be abbreviating it to SEM. It's easier that way because most of our customers and partners, they understand this name well. So if you hear SEM, then it's Social Event Manager, which is the main thing. So what is SEM? SEM is an AR server plugin. It's an ARDBC plugin. Needs to be installed on the AR server, on the main AR server. Okay, it's installed by the UX patch installer. What's a UX patch installer? SmartIT, MyIT is an independent application that runs outside, but to work with AR server, it needs to add its configuration into the AR server. UX patch installer is that way of getting into the AR server, making our extensions as part of the AR server. So this is installed as part of that installer. Then it's responsible for sending REST API calls to the server. Okay, so it taps into all the events in the ITSM server. So what are the events? They are ticket creation. So anytime you have incident, change, problem, any of these tickets do get created, we do get that information into social, and SEM is the mode of transportation for that. Okay, any status changes, as you have seen in the previous, the social component slide, we do get a lot of events from what happened to the ticket itself or the entity itself, like status change, priority changes. Those are also tapped in. One of the cool things is we also sync the people creation. So we tap into the foundation, we get there and we get all the information of the foundation, and we also have a capability to assigning an image to the person that's in the ITSM foundation. So any person that gets created on the ITSM people form, they get updated with this. And the most important part of it is the workflow creation, right? I mean, that used to be our, one way of getting into see what an entity is, what happened in an entity, what's the history there. Now, all the work logs that get created as part of these tickets or other entities, even knowledge, they get posted back into social. Okay, asset creation, every asset, every reconciliation job, these assets you go back into social and you have an access into all these assets. Approvals, assignments, broadcasts and outages. I did mention about the notification event. So if any outage happened on an, and an incident gets generated, that outage does show up on your user feed so you can quickly act on it, okay? That is how we get these events so we can help the end user, either the consumer or the agent, to quickly resolve their problem. So, how does this all work? How does this all work? So, ITSM data to social events. So this is one way of saying that something has to happen in the ITSM server that leads to social event generation. So this is the flow of information that happens. So we have all kinds. Now the thing is, if it's only going to be SmartIT MyIT server, then we wouldn't be getting all the information that people would do through mid-tier. So what happens is we actually connect everything through AR server, which is our way of communicating all the data back to the SmartIT server. So data can come from any client. It could be SmartIT, it could be MyIT, or it could be mid-tier-based applications, the standard ITSM apps. Okay, the client data sends it to the AR server. The AR server has a package of applications installed, depending on what applications are installed. Typically, it's ITSM, RK, MSR, and MASSET. Okay, and you have Foundation too. These applications do raise events when this happens. So I talked about the UX installer, right? So the UX installer, when it puts in its configuration, it installs a bunch of filters and some forms, okay? These are the extensions to get into SmartIT MyIT server. So what that social workflow is going to do is going to go and attach itself to every important entity out there, okay? And any generation of events on those entities is picked up by those filters and sent it to the forms that we created, and from that they get generated as REST events and sent to the SmartIT server. Now, where is that generation happening? That generation is happening on the social event manager. So it's an asynchronous process. We don't block any workflow. So as the workflow comes in, the events do come in, we just take the event and we let the workflow continue, okay? So we don't block anything. So it's completely asynchronous. It's multi-threaded plugin, and we send all the calls via HTTP or HTTPS, depending on how your SSL handshake is. And it finally reaches the SmartIT server, and from there to social engine to the data store. So let's go into a little bit more into operational side of things. So SEM, we talked about SEM, we talked about the data flow. What are the important modules there? Okay, there are two forms. As I said, as part of the UX installer, we do install workflow, which is related to each entity. In today's ITSM, we do record everything that's happening in all the major tickets, okay, ticket types, which is incident, change, knowledge, you have problem, known error. We do tap into all of them, okay. We do also get into broadcasts and outages too. So how does this all work? So the two forms that SEM will operate on. One is what we call a key store form. Now, as the name suggests, this is responsible for configuration of connecting to the SmartIT server. So it's a plugin sitting on an AR server. It needs to know where my SmartIT server is and what are my authorizational parameters. Now, as you said, you can send it via HTTP or HTTPS, but the communication cannot be tapped in. So we do have an authentication mechanism called token mechanism, and we send it through that. there is a social bridge form. Now this is the main form where it acts as event log. So every event that is being sent to social is being logged here. Okay. This is the only form that can talk to the social event manager. None of the other forms can talk to it. Okay. It talks via the filter plugin workflow. It has the capability to retry failed events. I'll go through that in the next piece of slides, but we have a retry mechanism too. And all failed events, as I said, are logged. As I said, this is your one-way shop to get in and see what's the health of the social events in the system. So let's talk a little bit deeper on the key store form. So there are certain constraints in the key store form that we do expect, and because this is happening through the installer, we take care of all those constraints. It should only contain one entry. As you see, the key store form, it has the service name, which is MyIT. It has a secret and a token too. Now these secret and token keys have to match with the MyIT SmartIT server credentials. So the MyIT server creates a credential as it's installed. Okay, it creates a token system. That token should match with this. Okay, we have a host name. This host name should point to where your server or load balancer path is. And this server is the SmartIT server. Okay. Application path and REST path are pretty hard-coded because our REST paths are not going to change. But let's say tomorrow, if for some reason we have to change our REST paths, it's easy to come in here and make the change rather than go and change in the code. So that's one of the reasons why we kept it here. So as I said, the main crux of the SEM is the social bridge form. It's all the data that goes via the SEM has to be here. Okay. So what do we see in the social bridge form? It's a big form. I'm only showing a snippet of it because most of the data, all you see is now converted to JSON and sent to the SmartIT server. But the important piece is every event is logged. Okay. Every event is, if it's successful, will remain in the system for 24 hours before it gets deleted. This is a new change that we did in the latest releases in 1.5. Before that, we were deleting as soon as it was a success. We changed it so that just for bookkeeping, we wanted to keep all the successful events too. So what do you see here? You see what the event ID is. So we always track it with a grid. As I said, there is a retry mechanism. So we do max of 3 retries, and the retry counter tells you exactly how many times this event has been retried. Okay, and there is a status where it will show completed, submitted, processing. So when an event is under process, it shows processing. When an event is done, it is completed, and there's a written code for it. It's an error, okay, those are the written codes, and if it is okay, then everything is successful. If it's an error, then we'll discuss more in the troubleshooting side, how the errors are taken care, how it is easy to detect errors, and what is the remediation for all those errors. You can also see the JSON sent from AR, okay, and the written message. Now this is where we have, if it's an error, we do keep track of all the errors here. Now, it could be either due to connection problems, or it could be a valid error, the back saying the JSON might not be properly set. Okay, all the errors do show up here. Success messages, depending on the type of notification or the type of event, success messages do show up here. Or in terms of simple messages, the success messages are purely omitted. Now let's go into the inner workings of the data flow on how this entire workflow is built on or operates on. Okay, there have been certain changes from previous releases to the 1.5 release that we sent out. Earlier, all the social workflow was filter driven. That means any change in the social bridge form would be triggered automatically, and it would be processed. Okay. Now the problem with some of the problems that we have seen with that approach is the transaction rollback issues. Okay. Now, what is transaction rollback? Now, we have seen in most of the cases, there are certain times where either a customer is doing a load test or someone is using an external web service to create incidents or to create tickets. So they come on a high load, and what happens is sometimes there are constraints where in the system where the ticket might not go through the entire thing. There might be some problem with the way the ticket is created. The ticket gets rolled back. The problem with talking to these multiple subsystems, especially through a plugin framework, is filters can't track that. So we would automatically send an event, but the event would have gotten rolled back, and there was bad data in the system. So how do we avoid that? So we took a different route. We went to an escalation route. So now we have an escalation that takes exactly what is submitted in the form. Okay. If the data is there in the form, escalation can get it, then it's live data, it's the real data. Okay. So escalation runs every minute. It's gonna go check the social bridge form. It's gonna look at all the submitted entries. As I said, ITSM workflow does create events in the social bridge form. Escalation then pushes those events into the SEM, the social event manager. Now the social event manager itself runs on a dual thread pool asynchronous system. Now what do I mean by that? So from the influx of events that we see in the social bridge form, it can be categorized as two different types of events, right? There are the current events that all the ITSM workflow is generating, and there are the retry events. So anything that did not make it into the social engine would be retried again. So the idea is, the precedent that we want to keep in is the current events take more weight than the retry events because they are coming and we have to process them. And retry events can happen due to many scenarios. It could be bad data, or it could also be because there is a connection problem. So in that case, what we did is, before 1.4 we didn't have it, it's one thread pool honoring all the requests. So we split it, we created dual thread pools, and one thread pool will take care of all the current events, so they won't be blocked. And the retry events, what we have noticed is, unless there is a connection error, they will be to a minimum. So we have another thread pool that takes care of retry events. Even though we distributed it into multiple thread pools, we see that most of the resource usage happens on the thread pool 1, which is the current events. Now, once an event comes in, it is sent into the social event thread, which is the thread instance that we create, and the process happens where we send a REST call to the SmartIT server, we get a response back, and we update the entry depending on the success or the failure. Now, success, you're good, everything is fine, we'll delete it after 24 hours. But if it's a failure, previous releases, before 1.5, we would retry immediately because we have a retry escalation that runs every other minute, and it's going to process all the retry events. Earlier we used to retry everything and multiple times. Okay, so we changed that model because, as I said, the retries don't happen often. If they happen, then we have built in enough safe bridges back in the back end that it happens because there's a connection issues. Okay, there might be some DNS issues or a network bandwidth issue, or it could be a server is down. Okay, it could be as simple as that where the retry can happen. In that case, the server is down. It is not advisable to retry it again. So we did put in safeguards for retrying. So the retry, as I mentioned earlier, happens 3 times, but we did a time limit on it. So the first retry happens an hour after when it was tried the first time. The second retry, even then if it failed, okay, then by that time somebody would have already monitored this, or monitors would have already caught it that it could be a network issue. Then the second retry would happen after 10 hours, and the third retry would happen after 24 hours. So if we did not go through in all this, then there's a problem with the environment itself, and it needs to be looked at. But by default, this time should be good enough for all the events to go through. Okay, that's the reason why we changed this into a scheduled time retry rather than have it go again and again. That's one of the benefits we have seen is now we haven't blocked any of our current events if the network is good and the retries go at their own pace. Let's talk about some of the configurations that are there in the current plugin. Now there are certain configurations that are required that come with the installer. So the plugin by itself is installed by the UX patch installer. So the required parameters that you see in the plugin are the server name and the server port. That's because it's a Java plugin. It needs to talk to the AR server to update the success or the failure of the entry. So it needs to know, the plugin needs to know what the server is, what the port is, and it can go and update it that way. Okay? And to fine tune your performance, okay, these are the optional parameters that you can set. Okay, there's one called private RPC number. What happens is the plugins, the best practices of the plugins, the AR server plugin implementations is you don't want to go on to the same queues as the standard AR server fast and list threads, right? So what we do prefer is go through a plugin loopback socket. What it is this is a RPC queue specially designed for all the plugins, so you don't get into a deadlock. Sometimes this gets overwhelmed too. So what we have seen in pre-1.5 releases is there's been a request that they wanted a new RPC queue because customers, these days the machines are high performance machines, so they can add more resources to it. They can add more threads to it, more queues to it. So we give a capability to create a new RPC queue. There is max threads that you can set up on the thread pool. So there are two different thread configurations. There's max threads, there's max retry threads. As the name suggests, one is for thread pool 1 for current events, the other is for thread pool 2 for retry events. The default is 10 and the minimum is also 10. So you can always go up. If you think you have a system with better resource management, then you can always keep it up so that your events are quickly processed. One of the things with thread pool is there's a queue limit to the number of objects it can hold if the thread is not available, right? I mean, that's one of the things. And pre 1.5 we were like unlimited. What we did notice is heap space going up, so we decided to put a cap on it. So the max queue size and max retry queue size for both thread pools, we default it to 50,000. Now you can reduce it or you can increase the number. It's up to how you want to fine tune the performance. Now the thing with this is if it reaches the threshold of, let's say, whatever the number we put in there, then what we would do is we will not send it to the SmartIT server. We will send it back into the social bridge form. The event remains there until the queue either releases some of its resources or until the queue becomes empty. Those are the only ways that the queue will address more events. If not, then it will keep on sending it back until the queue is free. So this is an example of how these configurations would look like. Now, where do these configurations fall in? Any plugins, they have to go into something called a plugin config.xml. It's located in the AR server install. Okay, it's part of the plugin server. All these plugins are part of the plugin server. Out of the box, this is where you will find it. Okay, the SEM plugin location. So the SEM plugin, it is a Java plugin, so it has got a lot of jar files. All the jar files you can find it in the plugins SVR FND folder. Okay, and as you can see, here is a sample of how the SEM or the social event manager is configured in the plugin server. You have the name of the plugin, and this is how we can talk through filters using that name, the plugin name. And you have all the jar files that are related to this plugin, and you have the parameters in there where the server name and port, which I said are required, which will be taken care from the installer side of things. And underneath that, you can put in all the optional parameters depending on how you want to fine tune it. So let's go into the troubleshooting side of it. So we have discussed now how the data flows, how it operates on what are the important modules in the SEM side of things. Now, what if you run into a problem? Okay, we did see some issues coming in, and as we categorize these issues, most of the issues we saw is mainly through configurations. So the key store data was not right, or there is something missing in the key store data, or more entries, somehow a new entry came up on the key store form. So one of the things that we have to confirm, the first thing we do confirm is whether you have a SmartIT MyIT server matching token in the key store form, and it only contains one entry. And the host name is pointing to the right load balancer path. What do I mean by that? So here are the examples. So if they have a wrong server path, that means it's supposed to point to a load balancer. It could be because of some DNS setting issues, or it could be because of some mistyping. What would happen is the host path would not be right. So this is the error that you will see. What you would see is, as I said, right, you would see there is an error, it says it's completed, it is error. Since it has not retried yet, the retry counter is still 0. So, and then what you see here is error and the server name. That means it's going to tell you that this server name is not right. Okay. Then token mismatch. Now, token mismatch can happen when, most of the time we have seen it is when you are in a load balancer environment. When you are in a cluster, we expect that all the SmartIT servers behind the cluster have the same tokens. That's the only way, right? Because load balancer can go and talk to any server. The idea is somebody might not have made sure that the tokens in the SmartIT server are the same in all the servers. What would happen in this case is you would see a session expired because it would go into that server where the token did not match, and it would throw an error. Some of the use cases where we have noticed this is the token got replaced through some manual editing or through some import mechanisms where a wrong token gets in. And that's also another problem where it can lead to this error. So this is one of the things to see and then say, okay, let me go fix it and quickly get it resolved. SEM plugin, what are there to troubleshoot? Okay, you got to verify the connectivity. Now, there are different ways that the connectivity can go wrong. It could be because the social event of the SmartIT server itself is down, or the Mongo database is down. It does not happen often, but chances are it could happen. The network is down, something wrong with the way the network is configured between the server to the AR server to the SmartIT server. Okay, this is the communication channel that we want it to be, clean. We shouldn't be seeing any noise on this traffic, and we want the data to flow easily. So that's why one of the things we want to check is how is the connectivity, okay, between the plugin, the plugin where it's running, the server it's running, to the SmartIT MyIT server. Now, easy way to check is either you can open a browser on that AR server, okay, and just navigate to the SmartIT or MyIT application, see if you can get access to it. If you can, then you're good. The communication is good. But if you cannot, then that's the first thing that we need to resolve before we go in and see other issues. Now, when we move to escalation model, okay, there are few things that in AR server we need to double check. One of the things is the escalation logs, whether the escalations are running properly or not. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, escalations for SEM runs on pool 4. Okay, so escalations have a pool concept, so you can dedicate an escalation to a specific pool. Now, what we need to double check is that server, what's running escalations, has that many threads, first of all, configured. If they are not configured, then we all run into a default pool, then everybody is like hugging into that one thread pool, and you see resource being, you see the machine on a high chunk. So that's one of the things we want to avoid. So make sure that it's pool 4, but we have seen in large systems where customers have lot of integrations and lot of applications that they use, where pool 4 might be occupied or it might be used for something else. So the recommendation is to go and assign these escalations a pool that you think is not conflicting with any of the integrations that they have. That's one of the things we do recommend with escalations. The bridge form. Now, what do we see? What are the problems we have seen till now in the bridge form? Okay. Only one problem we have seen is records are accumulating in the form. Now, how do we fix it? Now, record accumulation can happen due to many reasons, as I said, right? Any connectivity or any error in the system, you immediately see an error and you start accumulating the records. That means the error is something with the configuration or something with system not being available rather than something wrong with the data. Okay, so records are accumulating. What's the action that we can take? You can check the state of the latest entries. Okay, you have, if you look at the social bridge form, you can see what the last modified date is. What are my current entries? You can always find that. And for errors, review the message so that we can get more details on the problem. If you're filing a support ticket, these messages would help us immensely in trying to figure out where the problem is. Even for the support person to handle this would help them. Okay. The other part of it is log files. Now, these provide us a great help. The reason is the logs, there are two different logs when the records are accumulating on the social bridge form. So the logs are the Tomcat access logs. You can find them where the Tomcat is installed for SmartIT server. It's in the Tomcat logs, and the name is local host access log. And the date is, it records per day. That means you can send me, like if this is happening all the time, or if this is the thing that you have to revisit again and again, it's good to send like 2 days worth of data for us so that we can run some analyzers on it and see what's wrong, what's the rate limit of data that's coming in. The SEM has its own log. Even though Social Event Manager is a Java plugin, it has a way to publish its own logs. So it can be found in AR server install in the DB log side. Instead of AR Java plugin log, it's called Social Event Manager.log. Okay, you can, just like any plugin log mechanisms, what type of information you want in this log can be fine-tuned. It's part of the plugin, AR server plugin maintenance, where you can go and say, oh, I want only errors in this log, or I want everything in this log, like fine information. You can configure that, and the logs will print it. Both these logs will help the support person in figuring out the problem, and that way we can quickly resolve it and get you running. Here are the references. Anything you want to check about the SmartIT, the community, the knowledge base that we have. Here is all the information that you can look in. So, what did we learn? Well, we understood like what a social aspect in IT is and how it is helpful, and for the next generation of apps or the new generation of apps, how the social aspects give a great benefit in terms of keeping tuned to all the events and addressing them soon enough. So I get information of what I'm connected to, I can quickly see it, I can resolve it. Okay. How the architecture in the general SmartIT MyIT architecture, where does this module or the crux of the entire social communication, the social event manager, where does it fit in, how the data flows, what ITSM data we look at, and how do we transfer it as the social events, and finally how do we get the data back. How the flow is, we did run into some troubleshooting. The general issues that we see, we have seen it on the field. We have seen these things, and there are troubleshooting steps on that, and what you can help a support person in terms of quickly resolving the issue. That's what I have. And
thank you, Dinesh. At this time, we'll go through some Q&A. Steve, do we have some questions from the Q&A?
Absolutely. We have quite a few lined up for you, Dinesh. The first question is, does chat integrate with Link or Skype for Business?
Not at the current, not in the current SmartIT server. The chat client is a UI-driven feature that's available on the on all our clients, primarily on the web client. It does not integrate with Link, but there are things that we are looking at to see if we can make that work.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what does UX stand for?
So it's keep it short. It's more on how we perceive the system should work, or the general simplified way of making things work for a consumer. So UX is a way of saying user management, how user can interact with the UI, how we can make it more intuitive. So when SmartIT, MyIT came up, our main focus was to improve that, right? I mean, we want to simplify everything. The UI should be much more intuitive. So UX came from that. So that's where you can see that wording used in a lot of places. That's where the UX patch installer.
Great, thank you. Next question.
And the definition of that UX is user experience, correct?
Yes.
That's what that
That's
is?
what.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Dinesh.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, does SmartIT have survey functionality?
It has knowledge base, which is the part of what you get through RKM, but by itself, SmartIT does not have a survey functionality.
Thank you. Are all the events that get sent to MyIT, SmartIT stored in Social DB? Does that mean the same events data is stored in Social and AR database?
Yes, the data is duplicated. Yes, you're right. And the reason is because the way SmartIT has to work and the way we can, social module itself works, we can make these searches on an unstructured database pretty fast and get a view, a collaborative view for the end user so that they can quickly work on it. And that's the benefit that we get from the SmartIT server. The thing with that, to do that is, yes, the data has to be there because the existing ITSM apps do not talk to the social engine. They still have to go through the standard work logs and see them there. For that reason, we have to maintain it in two different places. And the social event manager is responsible for, keeping them that way.
Great, thank you. Next question is, how can you capture support group reassignment events with Social Event Manager?
Can I get back to you on that? I'll note that out because there are not a lot of events that we do keep. There are a lot of events that we do tap into. I'm not sure if support group changes do come in. We do keep change of status. We do keep change of SLA. We do keep change of priorities. Right now, I don't know if we tap into the support group changes. But if there is, then I think the way we would do it is, let's take an example of an incident, right? What do? You want to change the support group of an incident. You want to go from back office support to, let's say, front office support. Now, when you change that, all those changes can be captured through the filter changes, right? I mean, we can tap into the update call and see what changed, and we can propagate that. But let me get back to you on that, because I don't know if we do that today. We only take care of basic changes, like the important changes of an incident, which is the status changes and the priority changes. I'll get back to you on the support group change also.
Okay, fantastic. All right, the next question is, what are the impacts if you archive the ITSM data, but not the social data? Are there any?
So social data, as I said, right, we have its own data store, the MongoDB. You can, so it is stored in a different place. Now, there are good archiving techniques. We have provided good utilities on the MongoDB side to store it, but the loss of data that you will see when that happens is you can archive just the work logs and all the data on the ITSM side and not do it on social. So when you lose the data, there are utilities out there which we call it as an onboarding utility. That's one of the things I'll put it in as part of the thing, the post, is we have something called an onboarding utility where it can sync all that information ahead of time before any of this even starts. So it can take all your work log data and it can push it into social whenever we can. The only part you miss is whatever, like following part, like, with social what we can do is work logs are part of entities, right? But what I can do is I can follow that entity. Okay, I might not be assigned to that incident, but I can follow it and I would see it in my feed. Okay, that is the benefit that I get right now. So if you haven't archived it, then what you would miss is you would get all the work logs, the owner would see it, but you would miss all those information of whether the following information, event information, which is the status updates, the SLA triggers and all that, you would miss that. But that is not the crucial data, but the crucial data you can still sync it using the onboarding utilities that we have.
Okay, great. The next question is, do profile pics sync with the CTM people record in ITSM?
So if you see the CTM people by itself, it does not have any storage for pictures. That's the reason why we store all the profiles in the social side. If you look at ITSM, there are no pictures out there in the material-based applications. SmartIT, MyIT gives you that. So what happens is the CTM people form any updates on the person itself or creation. All of that is being transmitted to the social engine. So then you can go, and there are parts where in the SmartIT application, also in MyIT, where you can upload a profile, upload an image to that profile.
Okay, great. Next question is, if we delete a work log entry from ITSM, will it remove the entry from SmartIT updates?
I'll get back to you on that. I'll track that out. I'll get back to you, because I think this data is primarily history. We would like to know everything that happened on that entity. So I think it won't be deleted, but let me double check that.
Okay, very good. And this is for the next two questions, going to be for confirmation. First one is, will active links not work in SmartIT?
So SmartIT is, as I mentioned, right, it's a persona-driven application. It was built in for user experience. There are certain customizations that we did do. So there's a configuration screen where you can add, you can do certain things like how you can build a hierarchical grouping of information through menus. But by default, the active links that you created on the ITSM form, they are primarily for UI. Since the UI changed, they don't work.
Okay, and this is another related confirmation kind of question. So you can't have a custom menu attached to an out-of-the-box field on the incident form and have this reflected in the SmartIT incident screen?
Not at the moment. You can do it for the custom field, and the query menus, I believe, work in a certain way. It's not fully functional. It works in a certain way. I can explain that in the following post on the document on how custom menus can be added. I'll put that in the post.
Okay, excellent. Another question regarding archiving. Okay, so when archiving incident work log and remedy, it would be based on when the incident is actually going into a closed status. I would not have that option in the MongoDB, so it would be impossible to keep them in sync, correct?
Can you repeat that question again?
Yeah. So when archiving incident work logs in remedy, it would be based on when the incident is actually going into a closed status. I would not have that option in the MongoDB. So it would be impossible to keep them in sync, correct?
Archiving sync, yes. Both are different archiving mechanisms. So what goes into Mongo goes on the utilities that you can archive it, but by itself it does not any propagate an archiving step out there. So for the Mongo side of things, these are all activities. Okay, they can come at any time. It's AR that in ITSM we put in rules that mentions that, okay, don't make any work log updates because now the ticket is closed. Social does not bind by those rules. We do have some permissions built in. We do have some contextual permissions built in into our UI where we don't allow anybody to post on a closed record. But from an archiving itself, the data has to be done as a manual step outside, or it has to be through a backup mechanism that you have set up on the MongoDB side. Because think about it like, how Facebook or the chatters do it, right? There are continuous updates. Archiving is based on how much data do we currently have and how much data can we take it out as a static store. Okay, that's the way Mongo works, or the social layer works today.
Great.
Hope I answered that question.
Yeah. The next question is, since the escalation is running almost every minute, processing a lot of search and modifies, does the out-of-the-box form come with appropriate indexes, or is it up to customers to find and fine-tune it?
It does index basic information because we expect all the events to be unique. The escalation only processes submitted events. It does not process anything else. The new escalation only submitted events. The other escalation processes retry events. As far as the indexes goes, they are there. The form already comes up with out-of-the-box indexes. We haven't seen specifically on escalation choking on the data, because the reason is we do keep current data for 24 hours. So after 24 hours, all successful records are deleted. So we don't keep track of them. The only data you have is error. So the numbers are supposed to be small. In a working environment, the numbers don't go up that much. The current records, once they are completed, they are in a completed state. They are not something that the escalation is looking for.
Great, thank you. Next question is, will the Social Event Manager plugin integrate with other deployable applications like SHR?
Not at the moment. As I said, right, the UX patch installer was built for SmartIT, MyIT. This installer has the filters that can tap into any of the events, or that will tap into specific events, okay, of the tickets. For HRCM or anything, first of all, HRCM events HRCM app has to have the social layer, right? Today it doesn't. But if HRCM has written a capability in that workflow to send in its data, then social can store it. That's not a big deal. But right now it doesn't happen.
Great, thank you. How can we disable the offline users to be displayed in SmartIT Recorder?
Can I get back to you on that?
Absolutely.
I'll have to find that answer and I'll post it.
Okay, very good. Here's another profile pick question. Can the profile pick sync with HRMS data?
HRMF data, is it, I'm sorry.
HR case management?
HR case management? Are we talking about HRCM or?
HRCM, that's correct.
So no, because as I said, right, the profile syncing only happens on the social engine. HRCM does not use that social engine.
All right. This next question, I'll go slow. We are using SmartIT 1.5 and Remedy 8.1 SP1. We noticed that when users using the universal client adds a note with an attachment file, it will not be forwarded to the AR, so another user on traditional mid-tier will not see the attached file. Any comments?
It shouldn't happen. All the attachments, as I said, right, if you add anything into SmartIT work logs, the activity timelines, they should have a work log on it and the attachment should be there. Yeah, we can log a support ticket on that and see we can check it out, see what's happening there. That shouldn't happen.
Very good. Next question is regarding work logs. If a work log is set to private, not public, how does it work with SmartIT? Does it show up?
It shows up only to the owner of the ticket. The followers don't get that.
Okay, excellent. Does SmartIT maintain info in two databases? I noticed in the presentation being mentioned maintain data in 2 DBs via Social Event Manager.
So when we say 2 DBs, I consider AR server itself a DB because it has its own storage and it maintains all that. So the work logs and all, I think we kind of brushed on this before too. The work logs that are being maintained in AR server are also copied via social into the MongoDB. So those are the 2 DBs that I was talking about.
Okay. And
one is the AR database, the other one is the Mongo DB.
Okay, right. And just to let you know, we're getting down to the last few questions. So those on the phone, if you still have a question, please use the Q&A section and we'll get them asked. Next question I have is, can we share attachments in social groups?
That's MyIT product in social groups. Let me get back to you on that.
Okay, very good. This is going to be a performance-related question. What about performance on high volume of tickets? Do you have any test results that you may share with us? New Social Event Manager plugin is working on the server that Escalation does. Escalation is on back-end server that has other tasks as well. Any changes required?
Well, so from out of the box, we do run constant performance tests. We don't have anything that we published out there, but we have a performance review team that works on all these loads and try to see out of the box how much data can we push in. On a high volume data also, we have seen out of the box perform well. Now, I don't have the numbers on that as of now, published numbers on that, but as in one of our slides, I did show from fine-tuning performance, the better job would be is, okay, if you have, the most of the time we have seen in the performance is our events are pretty fast. We go make the calls from the SEM to the social engine. Those events are pretty fast. They go in, come back, they're in milliseconds time. The update part of the event, right, where we have to go back into the social bridge form and update it, that is where we did notice sometimes when there's a big lag, that's because of the queues, right? Queues are set up to certain min and max threads. So we by default use the loopback queues. If in case out of the box you're seeing some lag there, the recommendation from us is to put in a new queue, the RPC queue, give it a bigger thread count. That way it does not share that queue with other plugins. Now that will do a quick update on the data and you can quickly process it. From escalations wise, that's the reason why we put it on a different pool. We want to keep it that way. Other recommendation is to make sure that you don't share this pool with other escalations or other app escalations. In the past, we have seen that there are these SLM escalations that sometimes do hog up the pool. So we would like it to be separate as its own proprietary pool if we can.
All right, very good. Next question is, if errors occur, once the error is fixed, like a server down, does it automatically retry?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the retry mechanism is changed in 1.5. If the error happens, right, we don't automatically retry. That used to be before 1.5. Now we have a timer set on that. We don't know when the server is fixed. That's one of, we can't figure that out right now. So what we do is we run it on a timer. So we check it after an hour. And if that hour, if the server is still not fixed, then we check it after 10 hours. The idea is by the time the server is fixed, we don't halt the current events. The current events always go through. The retry events will be slow on how they are processed, but they do get processed.
All right, very good. Next question is there a way to disable task management in SmartIT?
Let me get back to you on that.
All right, very good. And that actually is my last question. So I'll wait another moment or two to see if many questions come in. And just to let you know, if you have posted a question that has not been addressed, whether it's from one of our panelists or answered live by Dinesh, it will be addressed in the posted Q&A. All right, and we do have our very last question, Dinesh. All the default values, what is the number of events does SEM can handle in 1 minute?
We haven't actually published that, but we have seen anywhere around, depending on the type of the system, right, the core and the process power of the system too. So we have seen anywhere between 200 to 800 events in in less than 2 seconds. That's what we have seen. So if you take it to a minute, let me see. I think around, I think the max we have reached is around 800 to 900, I think. I'm sorry, last time I said second. It's around 800 to 900 a minute is what we have seen before. So you also have to know that an event in ITSM or a change in an ITSM ticket can lead to many events. It's not just one event. So that's one of the good things with the reason why we show a lot of data on SmartIT is like there's an SLA change, there is a modification on status, and there's a modification on a node. And especially when there's a change in status, we also do have a way of sending in extra work nodes on it. So one event, one ITSM event or one ITSM change can cause multiple events. So they're not one-to-one, but from our tests in our local environments and all, we have seen around 800 events that we can process in a minute. It's how fast the escalation can give us. And as I said, we have fine-tuned our systems to keep this fast, and we also don't hold on to the workflow. So any social event workflow that gets triggered because of ITSM events, we don't hold on to that workflow for long. we actually quickly return it, and that's the reason we made it asynchronous.
All right, we do have a few more questions that came in. This next one is there some kind of license/permission required to connect to SmartIT?
Let me get back to you on that. I don't have the information on that.
Very good. Here's the next question, and this will be our last question. If you have two different SmartIT servers in an environment, will each server do its own social processing, or does this route to the master server equals true one?
Yes. So going back to our architecture slide, the way it is implemented even in a clustered mechanism is the node engine, which is the social engine out there, is embedded within each SmartIT server. Okay, it runs into the node process runs in the same server. Okay, so the social interaction or the social mechanism, the engine, happens on individual SmartIT server, but the DB is clustered. So the MongoDB, we advise it to be clustered because you can do the archiving or the backups or sharding. Any of those things can easily be maintained if we can maintain it in a MongoDB cluster. And for that reason, the data does get stored in a centralized cluster, but every engine is responsible for its own thing. So we don't go to the master server to get the data.
Great, thank you. All right. Here are the ways that you can contact BMC. You can contact us via the BMC communities, through Facebook. You can call into support. There's the phone number, as well as the web URL to get a hold of support. And as always, thank you for your attendance and participation.